Hey guys, hopping in here to chat with you guys about, insert the eye roll, SMART goals. And trust me, I'm probably just like you, so over the concept. For me, I was introduced this to my employer, and this is probably the number one reason why I'm so over this concept. And that's because it just didn't ever seem to work, or I was always having to recreate goals, and it just was a very frustrating process for me. Like, I just wanted to make a goal and go with it, right? But actually, it's a really great tool. I just feel like the way it was presented to me was maybe not the most conducive way to put this framework to work. Now, this is a framework that's been around since like the 1980s, so I'm sure many of us are familiar with it, whether you heard about it here on this video or you're hearing about it somewhere else. But it is an excellent tool to helping people get to achieving what it is that they seek to achieve. However, a lot of times, maybe we just don't utilize this tool in the best way. So I'm going to walk you through some troubleshooting to help you out. And if you'll notice in the title, I actually put an H at the end. And so there's a really good reason for that. So to start, we're not even going to start with the letters that are in this acronym. We're going to start with what gets us going. And that is a strong connection. Whatever that is for you, you have to make it so strong or you're not going to work on it. And this is probably one reason why when I was introduced this format at work, it just didn't fly for me because I just didn't have a strong connection to the goals that I was being asked to create. They weren't really, like, first of all, I kind of thought the whole thing was kind of silly, but I mean, also for me, it just maybe just being in that work environment also wasn't really just a strong thing for me. So whatever that strength was, I was lacking in that connection. Now, in the framework that I like to utilize for really just getting my life back into more balance and feeling more satisfied, they talk about this tool of this wheel. If I was really tech savvy, I'd have this nice little thing that would just pop up in the screen, right? But I want you to envision a bicycle wheel, and it's got 7 spokes on it. And those are 7 key areas of life. But what's also on a wheel, on a tire wheel, has a valve. And that valve lets air out. You can put air back in through it. This is what we talk about having a strong connection, that proper pressure in the tire that helps keep the tire spinning. If you don't have that strong connection, your tire also doesn't spin. You don't work on the things because you have nothing to keep you motivated, especially when they're goals you really don't want to work on. So you've got to have that strong connection. That is a foundation. And you would think that maybe employers will be like, well, you're getting a paycheck, so that should be a strong enough connection for you. But sometimes it really just isn't. When you think of like work and employment, this is just me spitballing here. If you're not passionate about what it is that you're in doing as a career, you're probably not going to find a good strong connection to work on those SMART goals in the workplace. So that is like the number one thing that's missing. And I can tell you, for me, one of my goals is getting kind of my health back into place. As a PCOS woman, having gone through some life changes that we've been in lately, I've let things get a little out of whack. So if you think I'm really wanting to, not that I'm pushing any kind of company here, but if you really want to get where you want to go, sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do. And if you think I want to drink this green smoothie, you got another thing coming. However, I do have some ingredients in there that I absolutely enjoy. I just wish I was having pancakes with maple syrup instead. So, and it's not that pancakes and maple syrup are bad, but my strong connection is really getting my health back in alignment so that way I'm satisfied and fulfilled. I'm leading a great example for my son, and my husband and I are getting just on the same page about health. So that is really a strong connection for me to pick up this green smoothie that I kind of enjoy and drink it. So That is creating a strong connection, really utilizing that valve in the wheel so that way you are just rolling right along with getting where you want to go and keeping your spokes all nice and balanced. So let's get into the acronym, and this is specific. S is specific. So again, I think most of us are really familiar with the concept of like reducing weight. So I'm going to kind of roll with this one a little bit. And so let's say our goal is to lose 50 pounds. It's very specific. We have a number associated with it, and that's great. But I think sometimes when it comes to these things, we start so big, the hamburger's so massive, we can't really bite into it and even make a dent into that goal. So I invite you, as you maybe make this like your big overarching goal, when you're breaking it down into more SMART goals, create small, tiny action steps. And I mean, start super basic. Like I'd almost take your action steps and even like take your bigger goal and break them down into smaller goals when it comes to something this big. So maybe we're going to spend a week just sinking in with what it is that we're doing when we're actually eating, because a lot of times we mindlessly eat. So we're going to spend a week journaling, just doing things as we normally would do. We're going to write it down. We're going to write down emotions that are maybe going on, some of our stressors that are going on, what it is we were doing when we were eating, so that way we can be locked in and engaged on where we need to make pivots and changes, and we're going to set whatever time frame and go through all the things that go with that. But we're going to be super specific about what that is that we're going to do. And I always think, again, starting more simply, breaking it down into smaller, easier, bite-sized, digestible things that don't actually measure on something like a scale, because that's one of our number one mistakes that we make, is we focus everything off that number off the scale rather than maybe diving into what our relationship is with food in this particular situation, or what our relationship is with money, or what it is that we want out of a relationship in our relationships. Whatever that goal looks like, you've got to take the time to digest. And so get specific on just starting at the beginning instead of focusing on just the end goal and trying to do a bunch of radical, crazy things that are unrealistic, and it makes it super challenging, and then you quit. And then you lose your connection with your strong why, so to speak. So that's S. And then kind of where a lot of us kind of crumble as we get focused on the big one instead of breaking it down and making it much more simple. The next one is measurable. So we talked about 50. The big 50 is the number that we're shooting for. And again, I think when it comes to like weight or even like finances or whatever, we look at these big numbers and we expect it to be done in a super short amount of time, and we just make it all about that number. Dial it back. Again, going back to our simple steps of maybe I'm logging, make it measurable in the fact that it is a 7-day process. And you can check that off that you've done the thing. And it can even be something that you've done for 30 minutes for 7 days. Check, check. All measurable, all smaller, all that feel a little bit more like, that was easy, I can do this. And it makes it a little bit more digestible for you in the process. So measurable, simple, make it something that fits into your day quite nicely instead of just focusing on the big overall 50. Okay, so accountable. And this could look like so many different things. I'm kind of looking down for some of my props here because I want to show you something. So accountability, and this is the letter that I always mess up on anyways in this acronym, and it's the one that even with my employer, I feel like it didn't get handled very appropriately. Like with my employer, we originally were utilizing SMART goals, and we were told to put them into a system, and we would come back a year later and talk about whether we achieved this or not, as if I was focusing on this goal that I didn't want to make in the first place all year long. So that's something that when there's no accountability there, you tend to get lazy with it and you just don't follow through with the goal, which is what would always happen at work. Something else more important would come in, and it was the thing that got pushed to the side. It became no longer relevant, and we get to the end of the year and realized, oh, whoops, I forgot that was a goal. I didn't work on that. So there just was no accountability. And accountability can look like a lot of things. I have this wonderful app here that I utilize, and a lot of us have these things on our phones, right? If you have like an iPhone or whatever, I always see like the 3 rings and things like that people post. So those are 2 ways of actually getting in some good accountability, making your journey real on social media, so that way you end up having to show up and show some progress, and having an app, which is absolutely amazing tool. I'm actually realizing that I've gotten a few things done. Like I've gone for my walk today, and I've actually done some research today on a financial thing that I'm working on. And so that's going to all pop up into my wonderful app that is in here. And it keeps my number, my tally, so I can see where I've progressed over the last whatever on my action steps. You know, all those things are great, but I really think people having a circle, an intimate circle, is the best form of accountability. So finding in people, because what an app doesn't do, what that thing doesn't do online through work, what showing up on social media, because some people are just really nice and they scroll through the things on social media, they don't even comment, right? People in a small accountability group, one, you need to show up and actually say you've done the things, because they're going to call you out. And if they're a really good accountability group, they're going to call you out on your BS. And then they're going to remind you why it is you decided that this was an important goal. They're going to remind you that strong, solid thing, that valve that you came up with. They're going to remind you why you're working on this goal. And then what's even better, they're going to help you figure out how to pivot if they've got suggestions, or at least lead you to somewhere that may help you find a pivot. They're great for suggestions, and that having community creates real massive accountability to get you where you want to go. So absolutely, 100%, without a doubt, you have got to have an accountability community. So the next one is R, and that's realistic. So going back to our example of reducing our weight by 50 pounds, this is something where that is a lot, again, to chew on, and you may give yourself an unrealistic timeline that most of us do, because we like our instant gratification. We like everything like yesterday. So, or Amazon Prime it to me, which takes no more than a couple of days, right? A lot of times we quit. We've dived in, we've done something for a couple weeks, and we quit because we're not seeing the scale budge, which is why when it comes to health, I really kind of reject always having this big overarching number. And I really like focusing on the smaller steps of, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? To get you to the number, because the scale will eventually move with you doing the things at some point. It just may not be in your unrealistic timeline. It took you time to get there. It's going to take you time to get out of it. The same thing's true with debt. Like, we want that debt wiped out yesterday so we can go spend all the money again. Like, that's not how it works, guys. It takes time to recreate habits, like, 90 days or 6 weeks, whatever that looks like. It takes time to get in there and get that in sync and create. In fact, actually, when talking about seasons of life, anything under 3 years, you might end up breaking that habit. So until you've put it out past 3 years, that's when it really becomes a lifestyle. So just keep that in mind when it comes to making goal changes, which sounds like a lot of time. But if you think about it, even in a year's time, that's 365 steps you've taken towards your goal. So even if you're just doing one thing a day. So make it realistic. Don't get so locked in on what that scale does, because again, when you plateau financially on the scale, you'll quit. And that's why you have to have that strong connection, and you have to make the things that you're achieving realistic, giving yourself grace. Here's another good example. So there's a talk that I was listening to, and his goal at the age of 22 was to be able to retire and be financially free, like no loans, no debts, by the time that he was the age of 40. At at age 42 was actually when he reached his goal. So it took him 2 years longer than what his realistic plan was. Did he quit? Did he go, 18 years worth of work, I'm just going to toss it all out because it's going to take me a little longer? He didn't. He made it work for another 2 years. So he gave himself grace in his written down timeline. So just because you think it's realistic, don't give up on it when it takes you just a little bit longer. The second to last point, because I've added an extra letter to this, is time-based. So you want to give it a timeline, and that's so that way it creates you to do action. So again, you might pick a date that maybe isn't as realistic as you thought and give yourself grace, but you've got to give yourself the timeline so you will work on the thing. So if it is, again, going back to our goals of weight, and we are needing to write out and get to know our food relationship, and we might realize that we need to take a little bit more time, but we're going to give ourselves a week. That is a good timely thing to have this done. Have done it 7 days a week, every day. We check it off, and we're going to reassess in a week and see what we've learned about our relationship with food before we even start working on getting the other things in motion to getting that 50 pounds off. This is that one piece. So maybe you've given yourself a timeline of working on this for 1 week. That feels very doable, right? So giving those doable timelines is, again, creating action, because if you don't chart it one day, you can go, oh, well, I didn't do that 7 days this week. And you'll go back and you'll sit down and you'll take the time to work on it, because this is something that you've given a deadline to. Now, deadlines, again, give yourself grace. You might need to change and fluctuate as you learn some things. But if you give that, it's kind of like a hard, I got to do this thing date. So that's very helpful in achieving the things. The last thing, the H, that doesn't normally go in this moniker, is to get help when you need it. I think that is the other thing that we don't do. We might spend some time researching, we'll go get some ideas, we'll try working on the things, but when we really are struggling with something that we hope to achieve, we don't get the help. We just quit. We give up because it didn't work for me, right? But you read a book which isn't tailored to you specifically, and we've read some blogs that's not tailored to you specifically, and I might have popped into a Facebook group and they all seem to be doing great, so it's got to be me. It's just not for me. Go get the help. Go get the help. Whether it's a course from someone who is dove in deep and they're passionate about what it is that you're working on, or it is maybe some one-on-one stuff, make the investment. If achieving this goal, you have that strong value, have that strong connection, you will make the investment and go get the help because you are passionate enough to get this done. Do this for yourself. Show up for yourself. Guys, I know today's video was super lengthy, and I thank you so much for your time today and joining with me on this journey of working through the hurdles that is the SMART principle of working on and achieving goals. So if you guys have found this helpful, make sure that you like this video, leave some comments, let me know how to pivot and help serve you guys more in here. And if you're interested in that app that I utilize, there is a link below this video. You can go check it out and determine if it is for you. So again, thank you guys so much for your time, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye-bye.